Hare Krishna. Hello and welcome to this another edition of this web-based discussion platform titled India is Still India, where we are deliberating, discussing with various subject matter experts or people who have been around, who have various perspectives on this, the issues which the current day human society face, and what are the ways by which some of these problems can be addressed is what we have been discussing over a period of time. Today, again, we are continuing with the part two or session two of the continuation of the last session which we had with Mr. Bharat Trivedi, who has agreed to join in again. Thank you, sir, for joining again for continuation of the another session.
My pleasure, sir.
And today we are, last session, whenever we had that, we discussed with him about the, various things about difference in the Western mindset and what is the Indian mindset that needs some correction or needs some transformation, which we discussed in length. The first question which I put forward to him was, what was the reason for migration, or what is the reason primarily today, even a youngster or many people in India of what I call as an young age bracket look forward to migrate, is what we discussed in length also. And what are the ways by which the Western society function, like the rules and regulations or the implementation of laws, that also be a little bit deliberated to some extent. So continuation of that, today, yesterday, he also made a very nice, last session, he made a nice point that how this importance of the decentralized, like a village-based economy or a Swarajya, which should solve many of the problems which he hinted, but we could not, due to want of time, discuss much. Today, we want to continue with the discussion where we left last time. Now, the question which comes to me is that because you have been in Australia for many, many years, now, how do you perceive this, that a rural place or a village economy or what I call as a countryside in a place like Australia, is that much different from a city setup where, say, for example, today, definitely the law implementation in a rural setup in India is mostly self-governed. Today, most of the remote villages, the police force or the court or something don't have much access to, I would presume, because of want of network or whatever we call. Even we lack the process implementation or procedure implementation in the cities also to greater extent. How do you see that the same thing is happening in a rural setup in a westernized country like Australia, vis-a-vis rural implementation of the law in an urban setup?
Thank you for having me today. We had a very interesting session last time, so I hope we can continue with some interesting ideas this time around also.
Definitely.
When it, I guess, comes to looking at the village setup between, I guess, a Western country, and we'll use a generic Western
Yes.
country as opposed to a specific Western country,
Mm.
and an Indian village. I mean, there are a few things which are common, obviously. You know, you have fields, you have animals, and you have a smaller amount of people. Uh, if you go into certain areas of the US and in Australia, you would not find, maybe you have one family per mile or something like that. As opposed to if you go into the European countries where the population density in a village would be much higher, just because they are not large countries by themselves and the population is much higher. But I guess the general idea which comes through is, how do you police, is it easier to police a smaller geographical area with a lesser number of people in a close-knit community as opposed to a more dispersed society, which we find in the city? Now, there are a few, we can take this on at least four, we can look at four ways we can actually dissect this. So let's start with, I guess, the society, how the society is structured in a small village as opposed to in the city. I think we touched on this briefly in our last session, where you actually touched on it in our last session. Let me just take that forward. In a small village, by default, everyone knows everyone. And previously villages were self-sustaining, which essentially meant that you would have a cobbler, you would have a locksmith, you would have a blacksmith, and all the things which are required for day-to-day running of a small village were present. The eating habits were different. People used to eat local stuff. Now what is happening is people sitting in, say, Kanyakumari in India are eating apples which are grown in Kashmir. I mean, that apple is traveling a couple of thousand miles just to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Now, why is it happening? It is happening because the doctors have convinced us that eating an apple a day is good for us.
Yeah.
Whereas that apple is actually very unhealthy because it has, it was plugged a couple of weeks back, if it's fresh. Otherwise, usually it is a couple of months old. Then they polish it with, very nasty chemicals. And then it is transported in a cold storage and then supplied to you. But because of our conditioning, the way we have been taught, we have started thinking that it's a good thing. And we can then take this concept where perhaps we want to go into this discussion, why there is migration from villages into the cities. Part of it is obviously economic, and let me get into that. The economic aspect is this. To earn, and we'll use Indian money now. So say, for example, a person who's growing rice, and I've grown rice myself, so I can talk about that with some authority. So if you grow rice in a paddy field, it takes you around 3 to 6 months, depending on the variety which you are growing. And you have to put in a lot of labor. It is not only a capital intensive crop, but it is also resource intensive, but also it is labor intensive. I mean, if you compare growing rice with growing wheat, you are perhaps putting 2 times or 2.5 times the amount of effort you would put in growing wheat. Let's put that on one side. What the wholesaler is doing in a village is he's buying that paddy, which is unprocessed rice, for between $9 to $12 a kilo of paddy, which is then sold to a consumer in the city for 40 to 45 rupees a kilo. Now again, and then there are varieties where this number could vary. But the point is, for a farmer who's actually working for 4 months per acre, if he gets 15 quintals of rice, which is 1500 kgs of rice per acre, that maybe amounts to 45,000 rupees, or in a good case it may be 65,000 rupees, and that's it. So he has spent 6 months, and and that land cannot be utilized for anything else because he's just growing rice over there. There is no intercropping for rice. So that's and I've taken that example very specifically to illustrate a point. But what you could do is, if you want to earn maybe 60,000 rupees for the whole year, what you could do is you could open a tea shop in a very good locality, just on maybe something on wheels, which we call a tela, or I don't know what's maybe something it is called differently in different areas of the country, but it's a roadside stall.
Correct.
And then if you sell tea, for 5 rupees a cup, maybe you make 1 rupee a cup. And then all what you need to do to earn 60,000 rupees, and obviously people don't only sell tea, they also sell cigarettes and other stuff, where there is perhaps a little bit more margin. So now this is, we can say that, farming is actually a skilled labor category, but say I've just compared unskilled labor in the city with a skilled labor in the village. You can see that there is an issue of there is a disparity between the earnings,
Mm.
because this person, someone in the city, he's not producing anything, he's just processing things. And
Mm.
this is essentially what cities do. They don't produce anything, they process things
Yeah.
most of the times, and they are consumers, they are not producers. Now then, let's take this a step further. We
Mm.
can go from someone who's a skilled laborer in the city, say someone who's doing construction.
Mm.
A construction laborer in a city would be earning somewhere between, someone say who's laying bricks, he will be earning anything between 1,000 rupees a day to 1,500 to 2,000 rupees a day, depending on which city he's working in,
That's true.
right?
Yes.
So to earn 60,000 rupees, this person has to either work 2 months or 1 month, depending on which city he's living in, right?
Correct.
So you have put, there is someone who needs to not only have land,
Mm.
but he needs to manage 100 things just to earn 6,000 rupees. Then we take it a step further. You take it to the professionals and people who are doing large businesses. It's very easy for them to make this kind of money. So not only in India, but also in the West, my observation has been that this disparity and I guess, misallocation of capital,
Mm.
where we are producing things which we actually don't require,
Mm.
is causing the issue. I mean, a person who's coding, and this means no disrespect to people who are in this profession, but someone who's creating something, someone who's doing programming on a computer,
Mm.
you can live without that programming.
Yeah,
Worst comes to worst, but you cannot live without food,
that's
right?
very true.
But then the way we have misallocated our priorities, misallocated the way things work, um, we are not perhaps rewarding the people who are engaged in primary production as much as we should have, or as
That's very
much
true.
as we should do. So what that does in the mind of um, a villager, and who's, especially if he's a landless laborer, then he has really no chance to make good in the village, because his opportunities are very limited. They are usually limited to manual labor.
This point, see, actually, I touched upon in my previous session also. And what I intend to do also is that to have a separate session on this agriculture, or what I call as how to make the village economy more lucrative. See, the idea is very true. What you brought in here is that the overall economy, the village economy today is not looking lucrative for the man who is living there, or for the family. So he is forced to leave that place, looking out for some greener pastures. And but the comparison, why I bring always this Western vis-a-vis Indian situation, is that even I presume here, even from little experience, from whatever traveling I have done across the globe, I still presume that the societal problems which India today face is far lower than the societal problems which any of these so-called advanced countries face. And the primary reason for that is a concentration of all these people who have migrated from the villages to the cities in any of the Western country, or even to our own metropolitan cities in our country.
Well, there are two factors to it. I think the, the the most basic factor, I was thinking about this today morning. What has happened is, with the advent of modern machines, with the advent of modern education, with the advent of the modern way of life, the biggest single threat which it is posing is to the family unit.
Correct.
Now, once you break the family unit and you break the familial bonds, essentially, because family is the first unit which provides a person identity. Now, when you break that familial bond, what will happen is it will create people who are missing their identity, and then they'll start looking for things where they feel a belonging to. And when that happens, And if there is no correct guidance for these people, then what happens is then you get all these kinds of issues. Regardless of what we think,
mm,
the villages are actually more safe, and they
mm,
continue to be more safe, not only in India but also in the West. See,
mm,
what happens is, in a small tight knit community, everyone knows everyone.
mm,
So the tendency to do nonsense is, um, I guess, is curtailed just by that cohesion,
mm,
not only the familial cohesion, but also the societal cohesion.
mm.
What the modern society does is it chips away at these basic building blocks of the society. So once we used to have joint families previously in India. Even the West used to have joint families.
Mm,
But what has happened is, once you come into the city,
mm,
so say you buy, your family comes from the village, they buy a house. So today it is whatever, 2,000 rupees per square feet.
mm.
In 5 or 10 years time, the 2,000 rupees per square feet goes up to 5,000 rupees per square feet. And then maybe
Yes.
in 20 years, when the children are ready, they can't live near the parents,
Mm,
because the cost of the property has gone up much higher
mm,
than what their salaries, or the children cannot afford to live near the parents.
mm,
But in the village, that is not an issue, because land is aplenty, and
mm,
land is not priced the way it is priced in a city.
mm,
So again, the just the way the modern system is designed, it
mm,
chips away knowingly and unknowingly on the
mm,
family unit. It creates these problems even without knowing that it is creating these problems.
mm.
So when children cannot stay near their parents, what happens is breaking of the family unit. We then say, okay, we are paying taxes, so then the state has to now come in and support the old age, people in their old age, through pensions, through nursing homes, through other facilities, even through primary caregivers. We have then, now in the West at least, and maybe it's
Yes.
coming to India, and I don't know that much about what is happening in the Indian cities. But in the West, what has happened is, now, because of, say, and I'm just taking this example of the land cost. The land cost is um, so distorted that both the husband and wife have now go to work, which essentially means is that they need another provision. So now you've broken the family. The child cannot live with their parents. The parents cannot live with the children. Obviously, there is some Western mentality also, where everyone wants to live independently and enjoy. When we can come to that. But many people, they would happily live with their parents if they were given a chance with little independence. So what is happening now is, and I'll take the specific example of Australia, the government actually subsidizes you to send your child to a childcare.
Mm,
Now, I look at my childhood, and I have happy memories of my childhood, because all of my time when I was young was spent either with my mother, with my siblings, with my cousins, and with my friends who lived
yes.
nearby. Now, contrast this with the child nowadays, where both the parents are forced.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't even want to, but because they just want to buy a simple house,
Mm,
they are forced to go and work, you know. So the child is now given to people who don't know the child,
correct.
who are not related to the child. The amount of care they can give and the amount of care they will have in their heart for the child is going to be different
Correct.
than what a parent or a relative would actually provide. Even a grandparent would provide.
Yes. So the point which I actually wanted to tell is that recently there was a statistic which was published, which actually reinforced your point that in the US, say in the 30s and 40s, the average, how do they call, number of kids they used to have was close to 6.2. And today, say come 2020 or 2015, the numbers dropped less than 1, or maybe it's 1.3 or something in many areas. It's all started because of the aspirational value which these marketing companies or the big companies have done. Today, I was just thinking in my childhood when I used to see this Doordarshan TVs, I mean, in the Doordarshan in India, there used to be some various advertisements which used to come. In those days, the advertisements were completely based on like an extended family. How happy a family was, how happy your chacha, nani, or whoever were living with them. So what used to happen is how your uncles were together, or what I call as an extended family was very, very happy. Today, what these marketing companies have done is that they have imbibed an idea that smaller families are much more happier. And I was thinking why they do that is for a simple example. Today, how do they show the same advertisement which they vis-a-vis showed 30 years back? It's like a small compact car where they say husband and wife with 2 kids and maybe a dog goes along, and the happy is a smaller family is a happy family. Now, what has happened is that in the previously, say for an extended family, they used to have a fridge. Today, that family has been divided into 8 families. So 8 of them have to buy 8 fridges. So what
Yes.
happens is today, if you don't make this family shorter, the product which they want to sell will not be sold in a similar fashion or in a quantity which they want to do. So the entire societal division has happened. What I cannot, whether I can call family division, I can call, is a better word, is because of this tendency which has been brought, that an aspirational value has been created, that I go to the city, I live an individual life. Say previously they used to call a nuclear family. Today they are calling an electron family, like a single mother or single father having a kid. And tomorrow it might become what proton family, or I don't know what would happen, without mother, without father, or whatever it is. It's all going to be some more chaotic. So every product which they want to sell, they have forced into our living space by dividing our families, which we ourselves didn't know. And this is exactly what happened in the West maybe 10, 20 years back. And definitely it has creeped into our system, our Indian psyche, much more, with much more vigor. It's coming in. Even everything about what they buy, the toothpaste, brush, or whatever we use. So a consumeristic mindset is actually killing our family relationship or extended relationship, which was actually the root, or which are the foundation of our culture or foundation of our dharma.
Taking your idea further, and it's not only the marketing companies who have done it.
Mm,
It is this is an ideological warfare
mm,
where people belonging to a certain mindset, they think that they portray that you will be happy doing certain things in your life, which means as soon as you see an advertisement, it is someone else's dream of how to be happy,
correct.
and you are then imbibing that as your own, or you are taking that and making it your own dream. Say for example, you could go from point A to point B driving maybe a scooter,
Mhm.
and you can be perfectly happy, and it could be a 10-year or 20-year-old scooter. But the advertisement shows you, no, it has to be the latest with the latest technology, this, that, because you know why? Because simply it's better. And that is not necessarily so.
Made to look better. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, people who are at least of our generation, or maybe a little bit older than us, we
Mm,
know that things could be repaired
mm,
previously. Now modern things, they are use and throw.
correct.
And they say, oh, we are recycling it. Well, that's a complete lie.
Mm,
They are not recycling most of the stuff you throw out.
yes,
It just ends up in a landfill,
correct.
or it gets shipped, from the Western countries, it gets shipped to a third world country where someone else, deals with it. So what modernity does is that it sells you the benefits.
Mm,
Everything will have a benefit. No one tells you that there is a risk associated with it, unless you are forced, unless they are forced. Say, for example, we'll go back to our lovely agricultural things
mm,
again. So,
mm,
food which we consume,
mm,
the amount of pesticides which are put into ginger,
Mm.
if people see
Mm.
what ginger production does to a fertile land,
Mm.
once one crop of ginger has been produced, they will stop eating ginger.
See, again, going back to the discussion of how a village setup or how a Indian traditional setup, I don't want to call it a village setup, I would call an Indian traditional setup, was that it was actually for a common good. See, I live in a community and the community owns this, not a communistic idea. What I meant is that it's for a common good, a pond is for a common good, or this resource is for a common good of the society, or something like that. There was some feeling of without anything on the paper or anything on the what I call a legal framework. It was used by the community and there was some belonging, a sense of belonging among the community. Today, what we have done is we have created this idea of a personal private ownership in whatever we have: land, tree, boundary, house, wall, table, whatever. So even parking space. So what has happened is we have created what I call as a fencing. I mean, the fencing has been brought closer, 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 and we have cut to the what they call is to the bone today. And that's where we are limping back, and we are not able to survive as a human race. And this should have been much more. Why I bring this topic is that I feel it might have been much more prevalent in a Western environment. And mostly that's where we are also getting today from India, also is getting the same thing.
Yes, it has come, or this idea of personal property has come from the West in the way it is today and the way we practice it today.
Mm.
But there was a sense of personal property in the Indian system also.
Mm. Yeah.
It is understood differently and it is worked out differently.
Mm.
But what has happened is there is a parallel theme which is running here, which is the advent of modern law.
Mm.
And that modern law is, you could do things which are immoral, but they may be perfectly legal.
Yeah.
The the older system used to work or was powered by the idea that I should do no harm, which essentially meant that people would refrain voluntarily from doing immoral stuff, even though it may be legal in that era. If it is immoral, they will not do it. Now, there are two forces which determine how a society will function. One is the qualifications of the leaders of that society, and then the people who constitute the society. So, in the traditional Indian village, and even in the Western uh, concept, they used to have these knights, and then they used to have, the landlords, and the other
Lots.
noblemen, as they used to
Yeah.
call
Yeah.
them, or the lords. Yes,
Lots.
and these people would be given to govern a land or to take care of the land on behalf of the king or the queen or whoever. And we had a very similar system in India.
Zamindari.
Yeah, which is called zamindari.
Mm.
Now, what has happened is, obviously some of these people have actually misused their positions, not only in the West but in
Yeah.
India
India
also.
also.
And that is why sort of that system stopped working to a certain extent, and that's why we have the revolution, the French Revolution, as they say. We had the in Britain, now the monarchy is just on the
Verge.
on just for name only.
Mm.
In India, these people were removed from their positions. In countries like I guess South Africa, they went a step too far, and then there were mass killings. Even in Russia this happened. So what has happened is, the problem with the modern thinking is, they think because a system is not working, we should just change the entire thing and bring something new, because they think whatever they bring will work. What they don't try to do most of the times is to figure out why these problems are happening. So the
Correct.
problem with these systems it began when the leaders and the people following, or the common men, they both started not following dharma.
Correct.
And that is the core problem why these systems have failed, and that's why we have democracy. Now, in democracy, essentially what happens is, it's, if you are a small minority and if you are vocal enough, you get to win.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
And concentration of that group also matters, because for the winnability of the candidate and other things. The point
Yes.
which I also want to bring in here is that, which I think I touched upon in the last session a bit, is that we have become, I mean, the Western concept again, that we have become a right-based society rather than a duty-based society.
Duty-based society.
See,
Exactly.
why I call this is, see, today everybody is asking for some rights. I have this rights for women, rights for children, rights for the downtrodden men, or whatever, all rights. So the law, which is the Western law, has made into a situation today that our society has been transformed from a duty-based society to a right-based society. On a
Exactly.
funny note, on a just a jovial note, I while traveling from somewhere, I don't remember, but I was traveling towards India and had one friend of mine traveling along with me. When we landed in India, and this topic came up for discussion, and that gentleman, when we entered the airport, got out of the plane and entered the airport, he showed me that the first thing you will see when you enter the country, or any country for that matter, is called duty free.
Mm.
So he told me that the country has become duty free. So there is no
Mm.
duties to do. All the
Mm.
people, what they want to do is, I don't have any duty to perform for the
Mm.
common good or for the society. What I need is only rights. That the law should give me the right, the ruling class should give me these rights. And if if they don't give me, then I am going to protest. So this the concept of right-based society has even more been the reason for being divisive.
If you don't train people in the correct way of
Hmm.
living as human beings,
Hmm.
then this problem will occur. Like we were discussing in our previous talk,
Hmm.
why poverty is not the cause of unrest, or
Hmm.
poverty does not lead to crime. It's simply because people who understand that their current position is perhaps a reflection of their previous deeds. I mean, it's a very simple question to be asked, right? It's a logical question. Why is someone born into the family of Dhirubhai Ambani and
Hmm.
goes to become on Mukesh Ambani,
Hmm.
whereas someone is born in a thatch with parents who don't have two pennies to rub together?
On a
Now,
funny
why does
note,
that happen?
on the same example, two people born in Dhirubhai Ambani's family, one became Mukesh, another became Anil.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you can see that one person was successful, or
Yeah.
he pretended to be successful for a
Successful.
certain point in time,
Yeah.
but then
Time was
through,
the
I
greatest
guess,
healer. Yeah.
yeah, or maybe through no fault of his own, he is
Yeah.
perhaps in a situation where he's not in a very fortunate position as
Yes.
compared to what he was previously,
Correct.
and then the other person is doing really great in terms of his material
Yeah.
success.
You might be well aware that in most of the Western society, there is something called a prenuptial agreement.
Prenuptial agreement,
Prenuptial
yes.
agreement. And today, at least we are, I would say, to greater extent, we are much fortunate that it does not creep into our society, but it's going to come in a big way. It's not far off. Why we
No, it's
wanted,
there.
right? Not to the
It's
extent
there.
of, yeah, not to the extent of what is there in the West. Why I want to bring this point?
Not really.
Mm,
No, not really. See, the prenuptial agreements are mostly done by very rich people, even in the
yes.
West today.
Mm,
Even in the West. However,
mm.
um, anyway, you continue. I'll make up.
Yeah. the point what I want to bring this is, see, this is where, sir, we have actually what I call is downgraded ourselves, because you brought this concept of being a humans yesterday. Last time we were discussing that being humans. Now, as a human society, that you want to partner with somebody for the rest of your life, thinking hopefully. I mean, we start anything with hope as anything. And why would you want to have a prenuptial agreement that what will happen, say, in a divorce, who will take this, who will not take this, who will. So, what happens is you are actually not running a family based system. You are going to run a what I call is a corporate kind of a setup. See, today I and you have to start a company and we become partners. Obviously, we will do into a lot of agreements that what is your rights, what's your duty,
Yes.
what is mine, and all the stuff. But
Yeah, yeah.
presumably, why doesn't the human being or the person think that we are not going into some commercial deal here? So the concept of all these, why I bring this concept is, this is where the mindset has changed. That you completely, it has become like, what is it in for me?
Yeah, the problem is, as soon as you bring in the word contract, which
Hmm.
essentially means that there is no common goal. It is contract means one party gets something, the other party loses something, and then the other party gains by losing that thing. So contract means, when there is a mutual exchange
Hmm.
for each other's benefit. It's in the Vedic concept, it is more like a partnership.
Hmm.
Marriage is like a partnership
Hmm.
whereby both husband and wife,
Hmm.
they help each other to
Hmm.
increase their spiritual life or to act in a dharmic way,
Hmm.
as opposed to modern marriages where it is to enhance the sensual pleasures. If you feed me chapatis every day,
Hmm.
at some point in time I'll say there it is enough chapatis, I want something else, I want some variety. Now this is the exact nature of material sense, whereby it has limits
Hmm.
and then it wants a change. So if the marriage is simply based upon the sense gratification of one partner, maybe because there are two people in there, one may become dissatisfied for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And because there is, as you were mentioning, there is no sense of duty,
Hmm.
there is no sense of belongingness,
Hmm.
and because it was a contract to further each other's sensual or to provide sensual gratification to each
Hmm.
other, once you stop providing that sensual gratification, or the other party feels that he's not getting that sensual gratification anymore,
Hmm.
the marriage ends. And also, let me bring in another point.
Hmm.
The way the modern law is structured
Hmm.
is that it is entirely biased towards women,
Very true.
which essentially means, I mean, in India, if a woman goes to a police station and complains
Hmm.
that I am being harassed for dowry,
Hmm.
or someone has tried to do something with me, you're
Hmm.
put into jail and it's a non-bailable offense.
That's very true.
What that means is that a family, I mean, someone's parents, someone's relatives can all be sent to jail because someone has gone and given a statement in a police station. The police, because of the way the law is structured,
Hmm.
has no option but to put these people into jail. And this has been successfully used by many women to threaten, their the families where they were wedded into. It has become an extortion mechanism. And this, what then this does is, we go back to, it destroys the family again, and that's why people don't want to get married, because
Correct.
who wants to take this headache
Very
of
true.
exposing themselves to a person who they have not known. And that is why when you go back to close knit societies again, if you even marry in the next village or five villages, apart from your village, the everyone knows everyone, so the people know what character person the girl is going to marry, what the character of the boy is, what the character of the girl is. But in today's world, everyone does it through websites. where one person living in one part of the world is connected to another person in living in another part of the world. Both don't know what their histories are.
There was what they used to call the marriage ceremony is that the entire village of both the bride and bridegroom comes as a witness to this event. And what actually the traditional dharmic view was that they are the witness to this event, and in future also they are the people. Even if something goes little bit friction develops, these are the people who are going to come and sort this out to certain extent. These people who came as a witness on this event will obviously come and help. There was no agreement, there was no marriage certificate, there was no that certificate, this certificate, registrar certificate, or whatever it is. Today, what has happened is that we don't want these witnesses to come, that there is a law like this. So these people, if I go into a contract, I get a marriage certificate. These are all his duties. No, sorry, rights again, no duties, of course. So again, the rights come in. So if he is not, my right is not being fulfilled. So I can go and go to the court of law. But what they fail to understand, even if the court implements something, their relationship or their family life has completely gone from an irreparable loss. At least in the earlier setup, there was a way in which the situation would have been mended. But today, it becomes completely out of control that it has to go to divorce, and it becomes again another marriage or whatever it is. And this is where what you said is very true. In the Western world today, that marriage is completely reduced. There is hardly any marriage happening, official marriages. And most of the children born are out of wedlock, which is
Many. I
many.
mean, even there are still marriages happening, and it's a big industry actually. People spend a lot of money to get married, and
Even in the West, is
see,
it?
even in the West, see, what we have to understand is things are same and things are different at the same time. So let me explain. The institution of marriage, and especially let me just talk about the Christian countries because that's where I've had more exposure to. The institution of marriage is still revered. The institution of marriage is still held in high esteem, not by everyone, but for most people in general. Most people want to do the right thing. But what is happening is because there is no training, and because of the lack of training, people do things which they can't control. So if you talk about the Vedic understanding of it, we would say that they are being guided by their senses. Their senses are not in their control. And the entire Vedic system actually teaches you to do sense control. And the point of marriage is also sense control. But the Vedic system, it regulates things. And that is the beauty of the Vedic system, as opposed to the modern system, where modernity says you enjoy your senses to the maximum. Whereas the Vedic view is, yes, you enjoy your senses, but this is the right way, or this is a balanced way of doing it. It has its dharmic aspects also, but this is one very core part of creating the institution of marriage. Because without marriage, and what is happening now is, and this goes back to your point, why there are so many single mothers with children. And without the institution of marriage, these women are being fed to the wolves. And I'll tell you another interesting thing. I'm actually working on a project. I'm consulting for a project which is working on the homelessness in Australia. And interesting observation is that women who are above 38 or 39 years of age, which essentially means they are past their age of bearing children, many of these women, once the marriage breaks down, they are essentially homeless. So what happens then is, essentially the government has to come in and take care of these women.
Of course.
So what we have done is, because we have broken the family unit from the joint family. Now in joint family, say if you have, as you were mentioning, say if you have 5 children and all of them live together, one of them dies, his children or his wife, They don't have to go and fetch for food or living or anything outside because the family is there to support them.
Yeah.
But with the modern system, what we are saying is, let the government take care of it because I am paying taxes. So it is my right that the government, provides me these facilities. It's a convoluted way of, living one's life. The modern way of life introduces complexities where complexities shouldn't be there. I'll tell you an example from my own childhood. When I was around, I think 7 or 8 years of age, my mother fell extremely sick. We were in a joint family environment at that point in time. My mother could not get out of bed for, I think, a month, and there was a good chance that she would not survive the disease. But not for a day. We were not fed, we were not clothed, or we had any kind of discomfort because our mother wasn't there, because we had two other women in the house who took on the work, and we were cared for. But imagine the same thing happening in a nuclear family where both parents go to work. And if one parent for whatever reason loses their job, or they fall sick, or whatever else happens, their entire world is destroyed. They have no support mechanism. So essentially what happens is then they become the wards of the state.
Correct.
And the state is the state. How much can the state do?
Yeah.
With all your rights, how much can the government actually do?
Do nothing. Today, the administrators think that the most of the problems, either in the field of whatever field you take, legal, agriculture, education, societal issues, everything, they think that a law, by stringent laws, or by covering up all the loopholes in the law, we would be able to give a better society. We will create a better society, law-based society. But that's what I was presenting the other day when I did this program. I think probably the introduction section, that in the last from 1960 to 1999 or something, every 10 years we had close to 500 to 600 amendments to our law in India. So many amendments have been done. We have tried to catch upon whatever loopholes were there where people were using. We try to cover it up. Still, the problem is not subsiding. More and more cases are coming, more and more ways people are finding it. So the point which I actually want to discuss probably the next session is because today again we are running short of time. We will continue with another session which I want to touch upon three areas, which probably one is that either all these problems which we discussed today, societal problem generally, can it be nullified by a law, by something which they call on paper, or some legal framework which can solve many of our problems? Or are they solving all these problems in the West? Because again, we are slowly following them. So that is one thing which I want to discuss the next session whenever we get time again. The other point which I want to, like a concluding section, I want to ask you from your experience, because you are already working on various projects back in Australia and also here in India due to NGO association, other projectual work. How do you think from your own perspective that how we can revive this, or at least what I call stop the juggernaut? And what do you foresee, or how do you foresee that at least like say 1, 2, 3 or ABC, some of the tasks which can be done might at least stop the corrosion of our society as a whole? And the last one is also I want you to touch in the next session is that what is the spiritual based economy? Because you brought a lot of this dharmic things, karma and other things. So how a spiritual based societal setup would be much conducive for a peace and harmonious society? So this is what I foresee.
Absolutely.
So do you want to have any concluding remarks for the session before we end today's session?
Yes, I guess I'll just repeat myself. We have to bring back the family unit, and the family unit which is following dharma, and that would solve a lot of the issues which we discussed today. Because essentially once people start taking responsibility for their own actions and not depend upon politicians, the government, or any other person for their own problems, and the dharmic or the dharmic way of life gives them the tools to actually live their life successfully and in a peaceful manner and in harmony with the world. So yeah, we can conclude there.
Yes.
And yeah, thank
One
you very
point,
much for
yeah,
having me. Yeah,
thank you really, Mr. Bharat, that finding some time and also giving a very beautiful perspective on various aspects should get a perspective of how the Western world works and where we are heading to. Because unless we understand what we are, how we will become in next 10 years or how we are heading towards, we will not be able to at least change something. Thank you so much again for
okay,
joining us and finding this
thank you.
time. And we will try to catch up another day in another session.
No worries, thank you for having me.
Thank you.